how do we reply to the standard sort of national interest argument?
Well, I guess everyone here has thought about that quite a lot, possibly more than I have, but we know that nuclear weapons do not act to prevent war and conflict, and that they're weapons of last resort, and usually, or the button's likely to be pressed at a point where it's much too late anyway to save a situation, and all that will emerge is mass catastrophe and loss of human life. But I mean, it's a good question, because just this morning I put something on my Facebook to say I was coming here, and someone immediately posted and said, I agree with all your arguments about using the money for public services, but I do think that we need a nuclear deterrent in this country, and our security is very important. You wouldn't say the same about immunisation. You would argue for immunisation, and therefore we need. And I mean, I think it's been proven. It's proven over and over again that we don't, and in any case that Trident is an obsolete weapon that simply won't do any good. So, and I mean, the diversion of funds into public services and into public good, things that would promote public good, is obviously an argument that we can and should make. And I would say that that is far more in the national interest in a longer term sense than the possession of nuclear weapons, which isn't in the national interest at all.
Chris?
Yeah, coming back on both points. I think in terms of, let's think about this weapon system for a moment. It's designed, the launchers designed and built in America, and indeed the rockets don't belong to the UK, they're part of a pool which is shared between the UK and the USA. Now, I'm a nasty and cynical man, so if I was lending the Brits my rockets for 2 years to go underneath the Atlantic, you know, to blow up the world, not on my say-so, but on their own say-so, I put a little switch in there somewhere, you know, to make sure that it would only, you know, so basically, so Cameron presses the button, little light goes on Obama's bed, and he goes, oh, all right then, you know, or turns the knob to, oh, maybe not. So, how useful is this weapon? Even if you accept that we should have nuclear weapons, is this going to work in a way that the French one might? And let's think about all the other people in the world who've lived without nuclear weapons being owned by their capital cities for the last 80 years. You know, I mean, the Italians, the Germans, who actually had a large chunk of the Soviet army camped upon their countryside for 40 years, you know, who don't have it there anymore. We look at even Poland, you know, and again, they got rid of the Russians. Italy, other big, rich countries, Japan, countries which have not been invaded by them, you know, despite not having nuclear weapons. I think that the argument that, oh, we must have this is, I think, part of a UK post-imperialist mentality, which basically doesn't know enough about the rest of the world and just thinks that to be a proper country, you have to have all the weapons that are going. And I think that's probably the best way to come back at it, is to talk about A, what's the nature of the weapons system we have, and B, what about all those other countries without nuclear weapons that seem to have managed perfectly fine, you know, and actually been less likely to start crazy wars than the UK has. In terms of jobs in Barrow, unfortunately, I think that's one we just got to take on the chin. On the other hand, skilled workers in Barrow are able to do a lot of different jobs, and we actually make about a third of the satellites there are get made in the UK, you know, largely for peaceful purposes, for communication satellites. We do a lot of the high-end offshore engineering that's getting more important for things like offshore wind. You know, we do a lot of marine engineering, which is to do with modification and undersea installations. You know, so that the skill sets in Vickers, you know, a lot of it can go to other things. You know, it isn't necessarily wedded just to building Trident. There are other things that could be made that will meet an actual human need, you know, and will by definition be more useful than Trident.
Thank you very much.